The rain had just begun to drizzle when Celina Langston stepped into the towering office of Randolph Grant, CEO of Viridian Creative Strategies. The glass walls and minimalist design radiated sleek confidence, but her skin crawled. She had expected this meeting to be about campaign strategy, not a personal takedown. "You wouldn't elevate the standard of the retreat," Randolph said, carefully pronouncing each word like they were silk gloves concealing brass knuckles. Celina blinked. "I beg your pardon?" He didn't look up from his tablet. His fingers rhythmically tapped the edge, eyes scanning some document, probably a flight list or spa itinerary. "It's not personal," he continued, glancing at her without really seeing. "Our Glacier Pines Summit is an executive-level event. High optics, elite clients. We have to ensure alignment." She stood rooted to the floor, air thick in her lungs, her muscles stiff with restrained fury. He saw her as unaligned, unbranded, unworthy. Celina turned on her heel and left without another word. In the open-plan office, her colleagues averted their gazes, their keyboards clicking with a sudden urgency that didn't fool her. Her name wasn't on the guest list. But she wasn't surprised. She had known this world. Knew how it worked. At Viridian, reputation was a currency, and her wallet was considered thin. The irony. She was the architect behind the very campaign that had funded this wellness retreat. But like many times before, her ideas had been repackaged and rebranded under the glittering names of others, mostly men, mostly privileged. She was the shadow behind the spotlight. Back at her desk, a folder marked urgent, client revision, North Climb campaign sat waiting. Her campaign. Already approved. Already signed off. She didn't need to ask. She knew Randolph had tossed it back into rotation to keep her occupied while the team jetted off to Glacier Pines. She inhaled deeply. If only they knew. Glacier Pines wasn't just a retreat venue buried in a snow-veiled corner of the Rockies. It was her family's domain. Founded by her grandmother, revitalized by her parents, and discreetly co-directed by Celina herself. The Grant and Glacier Grant wasn't just decorative. It was personal. But no one at Viridian knew that. 3 years ago, Celina had chosen anonymity. She had wanted to earn her name in the real world, unaided by legacy or nepotism. She'd taken the junior strategist position at Viridian with no mention of her lineage. Studio apartment. Subway commutes. Discounted blazers. She played the part of the gritty up-and-comer with careful precision. It wasn't humility. It was a test of the system. And the system had failed. Her phone buzzed. Her mother's name appeared. For the first time in months, Celina tapped call. "Darling," her mother answered, voice wrapped in warmth. "Is everything?" "I need a favor," Celina interrupted, voice steady. "Is the Frost Peak Lodge available this weekend?" There was a pause. "For business?" "Something like that," she replied. "Make sure the Monarch Suite is cleared. And don't alert the resort manager who it's for. I want the surprise to be unfiltered." She hung up and leaned back, eyes drifting to the gray clouds cloaking the city skyline. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about revealing the truth. By the following morning, the office buzzed with anticipation. Retreat kits, branded travel mugs, noise-canceling headphones, all laid out like corporate care packages. She heard snippets of conversations over lukewarm coffee, about snow yoga, herbal infusions, chakra cleansing, and retreat hashtags. Celina moved silently through the chatter, completing her assigned edits with surgical speed. No one noticed when she left a little early. No one asked why she didn't RSVP to the retreat debrief. They assumed she'd been left behind. They were right, but not for the reasons they thought. 3 days later, while her colleagues boarded their company-chartered train to Glacier Pines, Celina was already airborne in a chartered helicopter, the same transport Glacier Pines offered dignitaries and world leaders. The cold mountain air kissed her cheeks as they descended. The Monarch Suite awaited, its windows framed with frost and pine branches heavy with snow. The lodge team greeted her not as an outsider, but as royalty returning to her throne. "Miss Langston," said Ellis, the resort's concierge. "The guest list is finalized. We've prepared everything exactly as you requested." Celina nodded. "Then let's begin." Snowflakes danced around her as she stood beneath the vaulted wooden arches of the Frost Peak entry hall. The crystal chandelier glittered. Candles flickered against stone walls. Pine-scented air laced with warmth. It was perfect. At 11 a.m. sharp, the Viridian team arrived, puffy coats and leather gloves, wide eyes and eager chatter. The cold hadn't hit them yet. Nor had the realization. Ellis stepped forward, smooth as ever. "Welcome to Glacier Pines. Before we proceed, we'd like to honor a special host, one whose family helped shape this retreat and who will be leading your experience." Celina stepped out from behind a carved oak column. Silence. It rolled over them like fog. Jaws slackened. Eyes darted from her modest office look to the regal figure standing in a cream cashmere coat and snow boots laced with silver. "Good morning," she said, voice even. "I'm Celina Langston, co-director of this property. And I'm here to welcome you to my home." Randolph's face drained of color. Someone dropped a water bottle. The game had changed. And the players were just realizing they'd never known the rules. By noon, the frosted glass doors of Frost Peak Lodge swung open to reveal its vaulted winter cathedral, mahogany beams and river stone hearths glowing with firelight. The Viridian team filtered in slowly, stunned, wide-eyed, as if they'd entered a dream they hadn't turned. Celina stood near the grand fireplace, tablet in hand, exuding the kind of quiet command no business card could capture. Every step she took across the polished wooden floors echoed with intent. She wasn't angry. She wasn't smug. She was present, and that was enough. "Welcome to the Monarch's Suite Wing," she said, her voice calm as falling snow. "Each of you has been assigned a room curated to match your preferences and roles within the company. If you find your arrangement surprising, that's part of the experience." Nervous chuckles rose from the group. A few glanced at Randolph Grant, who hadn't spoken since her unveiling. He hovered near the edge of the group like a ghost of authority past, watching the empire he thought he controlled subtly rearrange itself. Celina led the way through the atrium, pointing out key amenities: the glacier-fed spa, the solarium for morning reflections, the summit view deck where meals would be hosted. No one interrupted her. No one dared. "Mr. Grant," she said finally, turning with a practiced grace, "you'll be in the Pine Hollow Annex." Randolph blinked. "Isn't that the auxiliary wing?" She tilted her head, expression unreadable. "It's quieter. Offers solitude. Great for reflection. Isn't that the point of all this?" He didn't argue. He simply nodded, lips tight. Celina watched him go, his gait stiff and uncharacteristically uncertain. Then she turned back to the group. "You'll find orientation packets in your suites. Please settle in. We'll gather for dinner at the Glacier Terrace by 7. And yes," she added with a half-smile, "the snowbound meditation room is real." As they dispersed, whispers floated in the air like frost smoke. Celina didn't engage. She simply climbed the staircase to the lofted observation lounge and gazed out over the snowy cliffs. This estate, her family's masterpiece, had seen governors, CEOs, foreign dignitaries. But this moment, right now, felt the most powerful. Not because she had staged a spectacle, but because she hadn't. Everything she had prepared was wrapped in restraint. The rooms, though luxurious, were paired with intentional symbols, success rooted in empathy, not extravagance. Those who had once ignored her sat now in reflection pods lined with hand-woven blankets made by her grandmother's foundation. Those who overlooked her voice now listened to the creak of their own discomfort in a lodge built on legacy and labor. That night, as the guests gathered on the glacier terrace, soft jazz played over vintage speakers, snowflakes swirling like confetti around fire pits. Celina wore a deep evergreen turtleneck dress, simple yet commanding. She didn't take the seat at the center table immediately. She circled first, speaking briefly with each team member. "Julia, the head of social partnerships who'd barely acknowledged her in meetings, now looked up with awe. "This place is incredible," she whispered. "You grew up here?" Celina smiled politely. "It's shaped me, yes. But I grew into who I am on my own terms." By the time she took her seat, at the head of the table, there was no question who the host was. The first course arrived, smoked Arctic char on cedar planks with a wild juniper glaze. The wine, a dry white from the Langston family's high-altitude vineyard, shimmered under candlelight. Conversation was hushed, uncertain. Until, at last, Randolph cleared his throat. "This is impressive," he said, scanning the table like a man searching for firm ground on thin ice. "You've clearly put thought into this." Celina nodded. "I create experiences. It's what I've always done." He took a sip of wine, eyes narrowing as if attempting to find a path through the silence. "If I had known about your background." "But you didn't," Celina said, voice even. "And that's the point." All forks paused midair. "You didn't recognize my worth because you weren't looking for it," she continued. "You were looking for mirrors, not windows. You valued branding over backbone. Polish over persistence." Randolph's shoulders tensed. "I may have made assumptions." "Correct," she said softly. "But this isn't about punishment. It's about perspective." The rest of the table fell into thoughtful stillness. For the first time in 3 years, Celina wasn't arguing for a seat. She had built the table, and now they were learning how to sit at it. After dessert, cloudberry tartlets with vanilla bean cream, Celina excused herself, letting the guests digest both the meal and the moment. She wandered through the glass hall leading to the indoor conservatory, where snow dusted the skylights like powdered sugar. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ellis, "Everything ready for tomorrow's morning session, perspective and reflection." She typed back, "Perfect? Don't reveal anything yet." Then she paused. No gloating. No mic drops. Just quiet transformation. Tomorrow, they'd learn about more than breathwork and balance. They'd learn about responsibility. And what happens when you finally see someone you've refused to look at. Dawn at Glacier Pines was a sacred kind of silence, no city noise, no artificial buzz, just the breath of snow settling softly and wind moving through evergreens. In the conservatory-turned-reflection hall, glass ceilings opened to reveal pale morning light, and the scent of spruce and stone lingered in the crisp air. The floor cushions had been placed in a perfect circle. No stage, no podium. Just a gathering space built for honesty. Celina stood barefoot at the center, her dark curls tied loosely, face unpainted. Not because she wanted to look authentic, but because she wanted to be authentic. After years of disguising her strength, she was done with performance. The Viridian team filtered in slowly, bundled in neuteral knits, expressions subdued. No one spoke much. Perhaps it was the altitude. Perhaps it was the mood. Yesterday had shifted something in them. Even Randolph entered quietly, choosing the farthest cushion, head slightly lowered, hands clasped. It was a gesture Celina noted, not out of suspicion, but curiosity. Carlos, the lodge's program director, opened the session with a few grounding words and a breathing exercise. Then he stepped aside. "Today," Celina began, voice low and sure, "we won't be meditating. We'll be reflecting." She paced slowly inside the circle, snow falling faintly outside the glass. 3 years ago, I applied to Viridian under a different name. My legal name, yes, but without mention of my family, my background, or my upbringing. I wore off-brand shoes. I brought coffee in reusable grocery jars. I didn't join Happy Hour because I couldn't afford it. I kept my life small. The circle was still. I did this, she continued, because I believed, perhaps naively, that success should be earned, not inherited. That my ideas should be heard because they were good, not because of who I was related to. Julia glanced at her hands. Jason shifted uncomfortably. And for a long time, I waited. For recognition. For a fair shot. I stayed late, turned in perfect decks, watched my work get presented under someone else's name. I smiled through it all, thinking that eventually, I'd be rewarded. She stopped. I wasn't. There it was. The cut beneath the smile. The storm behind the grace. I was overlooked, underestimated, and sometimes dismissed, not because I lacked talent, but because I didn't fit the aesthetic of power. I wasn't polished. I wasn't curated. I wasn't marketable. She looked directly at Randolph, then at the others. And when the Glacier Pines Summit was announced, I hoped maybe this time, I'd be seen. Not for my clothes or my Instagram profile. Just for the work. But instead, I was told I wouldn't elevate the standard. No one moved. Even the snow outside seemed to hold its breath. That, she said softly, was the moment I stopped waiting. A few heads turned. A few eyes shimmered. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, she said, stepping back. I'm here to hold up a mirror. To ask, what do we reward? What do we value? Who do we invite in, and who do we leave outside the doors of opportunity? She walked to a nearby bench and picked up a small folder, handing it to Carlos. This, she said, is a proposal for a mentorship and leadership incubator under the Langston Foundation. Its goal is to identify and support emerging professionals, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds. People who might never make it into rooms like this, not because they aren't good enough, but because they don't look the part. She turned back to the circle. It's time we made better tables. Where creativity, not pedigree, earns you a seat. The team sat in a stunned hush. Even those who hadn't known her well now saw her in a different light. There were no performance metrics here, no KPIs, just raw truth delivered with grace. Randolph finally looked up. I didn't know, he said. And that's not an excuse, but I didn't see you. Celina didn't answer right away. That's just it, she replied. You saw something. You saw what you expected. And in doing so, you missed what was real. He nodded slowly. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't polished. It was honest. As the session ended, some stood and stretched. Others lingered. Julia approached her hesitantly. Celina, she said, voice tentative, what you did, what you said, thank you. I didn't know how complicit I'd become. Celina smiled. Not in triumph, but in understanding. It's not too late to change, she replied. But it has to be a choice. By the time lunch arrived, the energy of the group had shifted. People spoke in softer tones, more carefully. No one bragged about accounts or follower counts. Instead, they asked questions. Real ones. And as the glacier wind swept gently over the snowy peaks, Celina knew she hadn't just disrupted a retreat. She had started a ripple. A storm disguised as silence. And its echo had only just begun. The next morning unfolded like a secret, subtle, silver, and slow. Snow clung to the window panes of the Monarch suite, melting in rivulets that mapped soft trails across the glass. Celina stood by the hearth, cradling a mug of pine tea, listening to the hush that only came after something important had cracked open. The team hadn't said much after the reflection session. No dramatic confessions. No applause. Just weighty silence. But that was the point. Change doesn't always begin with noise. Sometimes it begins when people finally stop talking and start thinking. She dressed simply that day, an ivory sweater, tailored gray slacks, no jewelry except the small brass ring her grandmother had given her when she turned 18. For when you need to remember who you are, she'd said. Today, Celina needed no reminder. The lodge's retreat coordinator, Ellis, met her outside the meditation room. They're gathering, he said with a slight bow of the head. Today's session? No scheduled meditation, Celina replied. But I want them to write. Journals, prompts. No phones. No performance. Ellis smiled knowingly. Inner work. I like it. Inside, the guests took their seats on wide cushions arranged in clusters near the floor-to-ceiling windows, the snowy cliffs yawning beyond them. Candles flickered against the stone walls. No playlist. No wellness influencer's voice echoing through a speaker. Just breath, silence, and space. She handed out leather-bound journals. No branding. Just blank pages and a quote embossed in gold on the first: "Truth is a quiet companion." She let the room settle before speaking. "We're not here to write reports," she said, her voice soft but precise. "We're here to listen, to ourselves. The prompt is simple. Write about the moment you realized the system was not built for everyone to thrive. And then write what you plan to do about it." Some raised eyebrows. Some stilled completely. But no one laughed. They wrote. For nearly an hour, the only sound in the room was the scratch of pens and the occasional shift of snow falling from branches outside. Randolph sat furthest from the window, spine straight, gaze locked on his page like he was trying to undo something with every word. Celina didn't monitor. She sat with them. Wrote with them. She thought of the gala she'd once been denied access to, despite writing the campaign that had funded it. She remembered standing outside in the rain, watching interns in rented tuxedos walk past her with tickets she never received. She wrote that story down. She wrote until her fingers ached. When the session ended, no one spoke. Some people stared at their pages like they'd just read something they couldn't unsee. Later that afternoon, Ellis approached her by the fire pit terrace. "That wasn't a workshop," he said. "That was an earthquake. Quiet, but real." She gave a half smile. "That's the only kind that lasts." Dinner that evening was less formal. Instead of a grand banquet table, Celina asked the staff to set up long picnic-style planks in the snow-covered courtyard beneath heated lanterns. The guests arrived wrapped in wool and down, carrying mismatched mugs of mulled wine. No seating chart. No hierarchy. Just people. Jason, one of the younger associates, offered to help carry trays. Serena helped a cook light the food station burners. Julia passed out blankets. It was subtle, but Celina saw it, the shift. Power had dissolved into presence. Randolph arrived late. He stood at the edge of the gathering, his usual authoritative posture softened by the mountain air. He approached her with deliberate calm. "I want to apologize," he said. "Not just for the retreat. For everything. I saw you every day, and I still didn't see you. That's not your fault. That's mine." Celina studied his expression. There was no spin in his eyes. No calculation. "I appreciate the honesty," she said simply. "But this isn't about me. It's about what happens next." He nodded. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." She raised a brow. "I read the proposal," he continued. "The Langston Foundation's incubator. I want Viridian to be part of it." She didn't answer right away. Just watched the firelight flicker across his face. "Not as a PR stunt," he added. "Not to get ahead of bad optics. I want to help reshape the ladder we've been pulling up behind us." Still she didn't respond. "Instead," she said, "then show me. Not with a press release. With mentorship. With funding. With policies. With real accountability." "I will," he said, quieter now. She nodded once. Not with warmth, but with willingness. Back inside the lodge, her suite was quiet, save for the low crackle of the fireplace. On her nightstand was a folded note slipped under her door sometime during dinner. The handwriting was sharp, deliberate. "Celina. Thank you for the mirror. I didn't like what I saw. But I needed to see it. If you're willing, I'd like to speak before we leave." She read it twice. Folded it again. Slipped it into her journal. She didn't know if she'd meet with him. Not yet. Not until she was certain her next step wasn't about closure, but about creation. The revolution she had started wasn't a fight. It was a blueprint. One made not of vengeance, but of vision. The final morning arrived cloaked in mist, the sun a shy glow behind a curtain of clouds. From the balcony of the monarch suite, Celina watched the snowfall hush the world below. The air was still, like the pause between pages in a story just finished. She stood barefoot on the heated stone floor, mug in hand, steam rising from her pine tea. No agenda today. No sessions. Just goodbyes. Inside, her luggage was already packed. Not because she was eager to leave, but because she was ready. Everything had changed. And not just how her team saw her, but how she saw herself. There had been no big confrontation. No dramatic resignation. Just clarity. She would not return to Viridian Creative. Her time there had taught her everything it needed to, and cost her just enough to make the lesson permanent. She dressed simply, stepped into the lounge, and found Carlos waiting with the closing circle list. He didn't speak. Just offered her the paper with a knowing smile. "I won't need it," she said gently. They already know what needs to be said. When the team gathered one last time, inside the sunroom facing the glacier, they were quiet. Reflective. Not the power players who had arrived days ago, eager for photos and prestige. These were people who had been softened, humbled. Not broken, just opened. She stood before them, not as a manager or guest, but as something more powerful, the host of their discomfort, and the catalyst of their growth. For years, she began, I played small. I thought humility would earn me respect. That silence would keep me safe. That working twice as hard would be enough. She looked around the room. It wasn't. Several heads dropped, eyes avoiding hers. But I don't regret it, she said. Because it led me here. She stepped back. I'm leaving Viridian. But not disappearing. The Langston Foundation is launching a leadership incubator. One that reimagines who gets to rise, and why. She handed a small envelope to Carlos, who passed it around. A formal proposal. A path forward. This isn't about punishment, she finished. It's about building better. No applause. Just breath. Stillness. Gratitude. As the team departed hours later, one by one, many paused to thank her. Some hugged her. A few whispered promises to do better. Randolph was the last. He didn't say much. Just offered a hand and a simple, thank you. She shook it. Then watched the charter bus disappear into the fog. No fireworks. No send-off. Just a woman standing tall, no longer shrinking to fit into anyone's expectations. She turned back toward the lodge, heart calm. This wasn't the end of her story. It was her first chapter, written entirely on her own terms.